Baker Mayfield has some concerns about Oklahoma in the SEC. Are they founded? Well, who are we to argue? But we're going to try on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddy here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on the KREF Sports app. And Baker Mayfield, man, a man of the people, a man whose voice carries a ton of weight in Oklahoma football, in college football in general. I think he's just got one of those voices that is always going to speak what he believes. He's always going to say what he thinks. And honestly, he's going to have really good opinions a lot of the time. So after he signed his most recent contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that 3-year, $100 million deal with the Buccaneers to stay as their quarterback, had this to say about Oklahoma's move to the SEC. Said, I hope it's not as rough as I think it's going to be the first couple of years. SEC ball, it's tough. The big difference is the guys up front, the O-line and the defensive line. They make a difference. Obviously, you talk about the football aspect. It always starts up front at the line of scrimmage. To me, that's the big difference. He went on to say, when you look at some of those SEC schools, when you look at some of these SEC schools, continue to push out these guys in the first couple of rounds in the NFL, and they have success. Obviously, I think it will be good for the school in the long run, but it will be a challenge in the beginning. Josh, you have the forum. Your reaction.
Well, I was a little bit surprised. This was from the Pewter report, and Scott Reynolds, who is Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat reporter. And I don't know if Baker said this in the press conference. The way the article read was sort of as though Scott picked him aside afterwards, following the press conference and got, a separate comment about Oklahoma's jump into the SEC. So I don't know how it played out, but at any rate, I'm surprised that Baker Mayfield said this. I don't think that he's inherently wrong to say it. And I think he's sort of speaking what a lot of us basically already know about why, it could be challenging for Oklahoma to begin with. And right now, it's maybe both sides of the line of scrimmage that you have legitimate concerns on. Defensive line, we've known for some time that Oklahoma has to go find those dudes up front, and we'll this season and then into next find out, okay, has Oklahoma found those dudes up front in David Stone, in Jaden Jackson, in guys that are already on campus and in-house for Oklahoma, how they develop the number of different names you could say up front for OU and along the exterior of that defensive line. And then, with all the turnover up front on the offensive line, there's probably for the first time in a little while, reason to have some legitimate questions about how that's going to unfold for Oklahoma. But I was just surprised to see Baker Mayfield say that he has concerns that Oklahoma might struggle a little bit early.
He is obviously the ultimate Oklahoma homer, but I also just feel like he's a guy that he has a good understanding of college football, that at some point, whenever he does decide to hang it up, it would not surprise me to see him on somebody's game day or, Fox Big Noon kickoff panel as, one of those analysts, because he just does such a good job at talking college football. But I think he's onto something about the difference between the Big 12 and the SEC. That's why the 2024 recruiting cycle was so important along the defensive line for the Oklahoma Sooners, because you had to be able to hit on David Stone and then continue to build upon that. You got David Stone, you added Jaden Jackson, you got Nigel Smith, Wyatt Gilmore, Danny Okoye, a blue chip defensive line class to add to, Grayson Halton, who was a blue chip guy in the 2022 cycle, still kind of waiting on the breakout. Ashton Sanders, who, if you've been watching this show for very long, I'm a big Ashton Sanders fan. I think that's a guy that has the potential to be a big time defensive tackle for the Sooners. The Adepoju Adebaware addition. R. Mason Thomas still kind of waiting on that breakout. You've got to be really, really good up front along the defensive line. Otherwise, you're just going to get bullied. And I mean, we've seen Oklahoma defenses in the past when they've matched up against, whether it was Alabama or Georgia or LSU in the college football playoff, not be able to hold up really to the level of physicality and the level of talent that Oklahoma had to go up against. Offensive line, this might be Bill Beatonbow's greatest challenge since becoming the offensive line coach at the University of Oklahoma, having to replace all five or the five guys that started the most games for you along the offensive line going into next year. I think he's very capable of it. And I think to have a doubt about this offensive line's ability to come together and be productive, to me, I don't really have the doubt. It's just more of like, I can't wait to see how it comes together, more or less, but it's going to be a different challenge as well, because you don't really have a lot of guys that have played against SEC competition. Michael Tarkin, I mean, he played at Florida. He kind of has an understanding of what that's going to be like. Spencer Brown played in the Big Ten, obviously good, tough physical competition up there. But then you're talking about, a jump for Febechi Iwiwu. You're talking about a jump for Troy Everett, Jacob Sexton. All these guys are going to have to make a jump and take a step in what they're expected to do and how they're expected to perform. Because, I mean, yeah, it was good last year, but it wasn't good enough because you lost games to Oklahoma State and lost games to Kansas. So it's got to be better and it's got to continue to improve.
And I think I've got the right one here. Here we go. It'll be good for the school in the long run, but it'll be a challenge in the beginning. So good for Oklahoma in the long run, but a challenge in the beginning. And I don't think that's an unpopular opinion, really, probably among most anybody that watches. Well, maybe some outside of the Oklahoma camp think that this is just never going to work out for OU and they're going to become Nebraska. Or there are some wild opinion makers out there that do in fact believe that. But I think a lot of people here and nationally feel like, yes, it's going to benefit Oklahoma in the long run, or it has the potential to. And certainly locally, we feel that way. But maybe you're going to take some lumps to begin with. So I can't today sit here and say that Baker Mayfield is wrong about anything that he said. I guess the beauty is we're all about to find out.
Yeah, and I don't think I think the vast majority of Oklahoma Sooners fans will kind of fall into that camp of it's going to be good in the long run. 2024, 2025, they're going to be tough. The SEC did you no favors. The schedule is going to be difficult. We talked about, running it back in 2025 against those opponents and seeing them again. You're going to have a tough couple, first couple of years, but that's what you got into the SEC for, to have all these marquee matchups. So Oklahoma fans, they're not naive to the idea or under no illusion that things are going to be easy when they get to the SEC. At the same time, there's a strong belief that Oklahoma is going to be Oklahoma. How quickly Oklahoma is able to prove that they are still that blue blood program that's going to be able to go into the SEC and compete for conference championships, we'll see. That's going to be the big question on everybody's mind. One thing that needs to happen is we got to have some newcomers break out, whether it's from the transfer portal or the 2024 signing class. Who's going to do that? Let's talk about it coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
This episode is brought to you by the spring cleaning champions, Manscaped. This season, make sure to groom your carpets and the drapes with the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. Clear out that winter bush with Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 and watch your confidence bloom like the springtime flowers. Embrace the season and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our special offer. Go to manscaped.com and use code LOCKEDON for 20% off plus free shipping. And not to worry for those of you concerned about maybe making a mess. This bad boy is waterproof. You can shave in the shower, in the bath, or in the ocean if you wanted to. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. Nothing like a little spring cleaning.
And this episode is also brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Looking over at gametime.co or on the Game Time app right now, what the Oklahoma City Thunder have coming up. You can get in for $6 on March 27th to see the Houston Rockets. Or hey, the Phoenix Suns coming to town. That's a big time Western Conference matchup. $36, as low as $36 over on the Game Time app. You want to take the whole family? Go see Sacramento on April 9th for $3. Or maybe you want to check out Wemby on April 10th for $4. You didn't get a chance to see Luka? Well, they're coming back to town on April 14th for $29. You can get in over at Game Time. Tickets as low as those prices I just mentioned. You can go use our promo code Locked On to get $20 off your first purchase using the Game Time app. Download Game Time today to get last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed, and using our promo code Locked On, you'll get $20 off your first purchase over at Game Time. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on the Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So Josh, it's that time of the year where we're kind of doing the prognostication, the projections, I wrote an article for Sooners Wire talking about, camp battles that I'm most looking forward to watching this spring. But as we project out what a depth chart looks like, there's always going to be somebody that is a new arrival that's going to have a breakout season. And Oklahoma's going to need to have some of those if they want to be a college football playoff contender, an SEC contender. It can't just be the guys that are coming back. You got to have some new dudes that are stepping into big roles, be big-time playmakers for you, similar to what Andrell Anthony was for you in the 2023 season, Josh. So is there a name that's kind of on your mind right now as somebody who is new to the team that's going to have a breakout season or has to have a breakout season for Oklahoma to be successful?
I think, a number of the offensive linemen, transfer portal additions, we're obviously going to spend a lot of time this offseason breaking those names down and how all of those puzzle pieces are going to come together. Deion Burks, I don't think there's any question, offensively as well, from a skill standpoint, has a chance to really impact things and probably is a starting slot receiver for Oklahoma. But Dez Malone defensively at corner, I think, is an interesting name to watch for the Sooners. Have you noticed some of this buzz building that Woody Washington didn't necessarily come back to OU strictly to play cornerback, that he's going to maybe move around a little bit, and that Cheetah could be a part of the equation for Woody Washington, that safety could be a possibility for Woody Washington? So sort of with that, however much of that you subscribe to, and dependent upon how that kind of plays out for OU, if that's to be taken seriously or if it doesn't fully take, or if it does, if Woody Washington winds up kind of working out for Oklahoma at Cheetah or in the safety room to some degree, does that mean that Dez Malone, who you brought in, experienced cornerback, all of a sudden is a breakout guy alongside of Gentry Williams in the defensive backfield?
I mean, the quarterback room is kind of interesting this spring as it is, because Gentry Williams is going to miss most of it because of the shoulder surgery that he had at the beginning of the offseason. But Dez Malone very well could be somebody that competes for starting snaps or at least rotational snaps, regardless of what you do with Woody. Who knows what Gentry Williams' availability is going to be like to start the season. Everybody expects he'll be ready to go by fall camp. by summer workouts, but you just never know how things are going to go throughout the rest of the offseason. So you're going to have a lot of guys that are going to be competing for snaps. But if they're planning on moving Woody Washington around, which I think that might be a good idea, especially play him at safety, because I think you play him at a traditional free safety spot and he's got good range. He's able to kind of play better, I think, when the receivers are in front of him, as opposed to, playing a chase technique a lot of times, which is what I've seen him have to do a lot. And he kind of gets a little bit lost in the wash sometimes when the receiver is behind him and trying to find that football. I do think he's a important player for your defensive backfield. But if you do like you did with Kendall Dolby and you move him around and just try to put him in the best matchup, I think that could benefit your defense, and it could benefit him more long-term if he gets some safety tape for NFL scouts to look at. That might be a better position for him long-term. So I think Dez Malone could very well be somebody that steps up and stands out in the cornerback room. I think defensively, you're going to see that from him. And I think you could see that potentially from a guy like Caden Woolard, maybe an unheralded transfer portal addition coming out of Miami of Ohio, but he had 9.5 sacks this last year. Will he be able to translate that to SEC football? We'll see. But you've got an opening at defensive end opposite of Ethan Downs that's going to allow for a guy like Caden Woolard to break out. Now, he's going to have to compete with Adepoju Adebaware, R. Mason Thomas, Nigel Smith, Danny Okoye. So there's going to be a lot of competition for snaps at defensive end, but Caden Woolard could very well be somebody that steps up and plays a similar style of role like an Ethan Downs. That's, hey, early downs, it's that dude, and then maybe giving way to, PJ or R. Mason Thomas to give you more juice off the rush. Obviously you look at the offensive line. We're going to, like you said, we'll spend a ton of time on that. I think tight end has to be a room that breaks out. You've got to be so much better at tight end than what you were. I do think they will be. I think whether it's Jake Roberts or an emerging Bauer Sharp or just a shocking breakout from the true freshman Davin Mitchell, who physically looks like he's ready to roll at 6'3", 255 as a 17-year-old in college. I think you're going to be much, much better at that position. I think Jake Roberts, at the very least, gives you a really, really high floor in the passing game and as a run blocker. And I think the tight end room, because you have 3 newcomers there, I think that could be a breakout position group for the Sooners this year after kind of getting very little, if not very, I don't want to say nothing, but next to nothing from Austin Stogner and Blake Smith and the rest of the group in 2023.
Yeah, it'd be, big time for this team if we're talking transfer portal newcomers for Oklahoma, and that's kind of, I guess, where this conversation has gone, right? Newcomers, we could talk any freshman signee, but, if we're talking transfer newcomers, yeah, if OU could get really anything relatively productive out of either Jake Roberts or Bauer Sharp, they are going to be in a much better place, John. You think Devon Mitchell, chance to come in and maybe set the world on fire a little bit just because he's got that kind of pedigree and track record attached to him. And maybe he just that special that he can do it, but that is somebody that's supposed to be a senior in high school this coming fall. Caden Helms, looking for big things, big growth there, but tight end is a question mark group for Oklahoma. And so that sets up for, one of these newcomers to be somebody that we're really feeling good about from a breakout type standpoint.
Yeah, there's a lot of players that could come in and have a big time season for the Oklahoma Sooners, and they'll need them to, because the schedule for Oklahoma in 2024 does not do them any favors. You get off to a pretty challenging start right away with Tennessee, and then you got to close the season with another challenging finish. How much will that November play a role in Oklahoma's postseason aspirations? Let's discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. The Michigan State Spartans can only be described as a Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have really created a lane for themselves after knocking off Mississippi State in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Many questioned if they deserved a spot in the big dance, and they find themselves dancing into the second round. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. So the Oklahoma Sooners have a path to the college football playoff in 2024. At 12 teams, it's going to take 9-10 wins to be a playoff contender. But with where they finished in the 2023 season, they would have been a playoff team. They finished number 12 in the college football playoff rankings. So they were just kind of right there and would have been a playoff qualifier. So you look at what ESPN has to say as they're looking at their top 25 teams from their power rankings, and they ask the question, okay, how does Oklahoma impress the committee? Finish strong with 4 straight home games to start the season. Oklahoma's best opportunities to boost its resume are in its final 5 games, 3 of which are on the road. October 26th at Ole Miss, November 9 at Missouri, and November 30th at LSU. With a home game against Alabama on November 23rd, Oklahoma could end the regular season against 3 straight ranked opponents. If OU doesn't win the SEC in its first season in the league, a winning record in November could mean the difference between an at-large bid and a lesser bowl. Non-conference games against Maine, also tucked into that late season stretch, Houston, Tulane, Temple, make winning those bigger November games even more necessary. I mean, it's going to come down to that final 5. I mean, I forgot that Ole Miss was October 26th. So those final 5 games where you got Ole Miss, Mizzou, Alabama, and LSU with Maine, that's going to tell the tale of your 2024 season.
Yeah, and how great or good or not great or good Oklahoma really is. I would, to me, I still think that Tennessee game in Norman is a big one early in the season for OU. I mean, you could pick a lot of games on the schedule. At Auburn is a big early season game that to me is, again, a massive litmus test game. And then, of course, Texas always is that game for Oklahoma. So, look, it's, South Carolina at home feels like a game that Oklahoma within the conference slate should feel like it's going to win. But that's kind of it, in 2024 for Oklahoma in terms of the conference slate. Games that at least right now today you can feel pretty comfortable about. I mean, all of the other games, it's going to be challenging, and not that it's just things can change. And between now and then, you can think you have the most difficult schedule ever, and then all of a sudden one of these teams isn't as good as we thought that maybe they were going to be, and then obviously it would change. But right now today, a lot of these games, outside of South Carolina, not total coin flips, but look, you don't chalk it up as a free W for Oklahoma. And so I get what they're saying. Yes, if you told me right now Oklahoma takes 3 out of 4 with Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU, and Alabama, yeah, probably you got a great chance to be in the college football playoff. But look, if you lose to Tennessee, Auburn, and Texas before that stretch, then probably you're not going to the college football playoff. So I guess what I'm saying is, John, start to finish, it's a very challenging schedule. And I could make probably a pretty easy argument for the beginning of the schedule that you got to take 2 out of those 3 to get to the college football playoff.
Yeah, I was just kind of looking at it as if you look at the first 4 and the last 4, I mean, you got to go at least 3-1 in the first 4 in SEC games. Obviously, you got to go undefeated in your non-conference. But, I mean, against Tennessee, Auburn, Texas, and South Carolina, you got to go at least 3-1. You're not going to be able to afford going 2-2 with the way back half of the schedule sets up. Obviously, you're trying to win them all. You want to go 4-0. You go 4-0, and you're really off to a great start. But, you drop maybe that game at Auburn. I know it's Auburn, and they're not projected to necessarily be a good team, but that's the same team that took Alabama to the brink and nearly had the Crimson Tide beat if it wasn't for was it 4th and 30 something, Jalen Milroe touchdown pass to the back of the end zone. I mean, it took a miracle play for Auburn to lose that game to the Crimson Tide there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. So I'm not going to put that one past Auburn at all. But you go 3-1 that first stretch, and then maybe 3-1 in that back, 4 games, and man, you're cooking. But if you go 3-1 in the first stretch, you got a little bit more wiggle room in that back half. And you're exactly right. What it looks like right now could look a whole lot different when we get to November. It already looks a lot different based on what we thought in December with Nick Saban stepping down. Now, Kalen DeBoer, a very, very good head coach. Very, very good. Will they be as good as Alabama has been under Nick Saban? That's going to be the question on everybody's mind as we get ready for the SEC. But yeah, we know the schedule is going to be difficult. The schedule is going to be tough, but there is a path to the playoff for the Oklahoma Sooners. ESPN went on to say how the path will be different in the 12-team field. It says, while it will be more challenging to win a conference title in the 16-team SEC, Oklahoma will consistently face more ranked opponents than it did in the Big 12, which will help boost its resume for an at-large spot. And that's accurate. Tennessee is going to be ranked. Ole Miss, LSU, Bama, and Texas, they'll all be ranked teams as well. And then Mizzou is also a ranked team. So right off the bat, you're going to have 6 of your 8 SEC opponents ranked inside the top 25 and probably ranked inside the top 25 all season long.
Yeah, you've got plenty of opportunities to enhance the resume. It's just the nature of life in the SEC and the nature of Oklahoma's schedule. By the way, it was a 4th and goal pass from the Auburn 31. So it was a 31-yard touchdown pass for Alabama versus Auburn.
That's sick. That is sick. That just brings back PTSD from watching Aaron Rodgers on 3rd and 20 plus, 25 plus against the Dallas Cowboys, hitting Jared Cook right along the sideline. Anyway, just kind of that kind of thing where it just hurts your heart for the underdog team about to pull off the big upset. So all that stuff is on the table as Oklahoma goes into the SEC, whether it's against Tennessee or South Carolina or at Auburn or playing in Death Valley against LSU, man. Anything can happen. It's going to get crazy. It's going to get wild. We've watched the SEC for years, and just when you think that you have a handle on who's going to be the best team and who are going to be the bottom feeders, it flips on its head, and you get upset if you're not paying attention and not careful. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in the show. Be a part of the show. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast for free and available on all podcast platforms. Also, go check out the Locked On Sports Today show. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef, myself at John9Williams. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. It's going to be great softball action in Oklahoma City and Norman with Oklahoma versus Baylor. Oklahoma baseball is going to be back in action again with another big-time series this weekend as well. And then OU women, they get started in the NCAA tournament as well, off to hopefully make the Sweet 16 in Jenny Bronchick's third season. First time to make the Sweet 16 for Jenny Bronchick and the Oklahoma Sooners. Go Sooners. But until next time, he's Josh. I'm John. Boomer Sooner.